Track laying project. The building is already done, and this table was completed yesterday. It's an 8x4 foot table on 40-inch high legs. The legs are removable to make the whole project portable. First thing to do is figure out roughly where the platform for the passenger ramps are going to be, and where we can put our turnouts in relation to that to bring it down 14 passenger rails to 4 mainline rails by the edge of the table. This is where the passenger ramp assembly is going to be mounted almost exactly. We can see that there are going to be 14 passenger rails spread out over about a 20.5-inch dimension, and by the time it gets to the edge of the table, it'll be 4 rails, be reduced down to 4 rails, all within a 5.5-inch dimension. And you can see we only have about 3 feet on each side to do all this contraction of tracks. After the ramp assembly was set in place, I've marked down where the rails are going to be in relationship to the ramps. Once the rails are all marked down across the board, I trace an outline of the platform in each case, so we have an idea of where the 7 platforms are going to end up. The tracks will be coming around and swinging around and then contracting down to 4 main lines. Once I've done that, I can pretty much lay out the turnouts so that we'll be able to spread around each side of the ramps and the platforms and try and make it as smooth as possible. Once I see how long I can make the platforms and still get all the rails to come down to the point I want to by the edge of the table, we can proceed from here and actually make the platforms, and later on we'll be screwing them in place right. It's Saturday the 6th, the platforms have been cut, and it's time to mount them to the table. The back 3 platforms are tapered at the end to allow the tracks to start curving inward and hugging the ramp as close as possible without getting cut off. And the 3rd and 4th ramp are tapered down to the rail level. There's going to be a small white service shack or whatever, one on this end and one on the other end on the 4th rail. Here the platforms are screwed in place. Next step is to fill in the screws which are sunk into the wood. We'll putty that over and sand them smooth. While I'm at it, we'll take care of any other gouges and screws that are in the track level of the table. After a couple of applications of wood putty in the holes, sanding them down in between, we finally got all the holes filled. Any gouges I found, I filled them in with putty as well. Next step is to wipe down the entire table down with a damp cloth just to get rid of the dust. And what we'll do first is paint the rail surface with a gray primer. After that's dried, we'll paint the rails with almost a white colored paint with a slight tinge of gray in it. Before I begin though, I just want to get a picture of some of the markings that I've had, just as a reminder in case I need to look back at them. Here are the markings of the 2 freight rails just before they leave the edge of the table, and then the markings, the arrows showing where the passenger main lines will be exiting the table. And just a quick view of how the platforms look unfinished. You can see how the one tapers down to the track level. That's where the service shack is going to go. And how the 3 shorter rails, or platforms rather, are tapered off on the left to make it easier for the rails to come around without interfering with the platform or the awnings. The paint on the table is done. Instead of using the gray primer that I had intended to avoid getting fumes in the house, I went to Chase Pitkin and got a color custom matched to a dark gray, and this is actually a little bluer than I thought it would be, but I think once the ballast is spread out on it, it should work out pretty well. The platforms are mounted, they've been puttied in to get rid of the gouges, they're sanded smooth, and they're painted a light gray. They came out pretty nice. You can see that the finish came out pretty smooth and pretty uniform throughout. This platform here, getting down to the track level, came out nice and smooth. All the tapers come out a little more now that the color contrasts. Should turn out to be a pretty nice layout. Now that I've got these done, I've marked with a pencil mark the rails that would be to the outside of each of the platforms. This will give me a starting point with laying the track, and as they converge down to the end of the table, I'll be able to place out my turnouts and try and get the smoothest transition possible. And here's a quick close-up look of the platforms in place before we continue any farther. And I just want to take a quick shot here to note where the turnouts are and how I'm using left turnouts and right turnouts in what position.